connectivity problems. We're live.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Tony. Oh, is he joined audio yet? I can't tell. You are here. All right. Good morning, everyone. We have got a packed agenda this morning, so hoping we can get going. Malika, I believe, is the only person who was not able to join. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do I feel like we're missing? Oh, Annie. Annie will be here. She and I were both at Fenway till midnight last night, so I suspect she is a little slow moving this morning. This might be her. But listen, we've got a packed agenda. As a reminder, this meeting is recorded, and we have quite a bit to get through. So I think in an interest of time, what we will do is save comments and questions from the committee till the end. If we have time, we will allow community questions, but there is a chance that we will not have time in that event. All of the documents that we're going to review today, if they're not already up on the town website, they will be. You guys will be able to review those, and then highly suggest that if you have questions or comments, to email the new email address that was created for this project. Sound good? All right. So just housekeeping items here. Shared documents as yesterday I shared with you guys not only the agenda but some documents. Those documents were the 2 documents that Tony had shared the day before. Thank you, Tony, for sending those over. I just included them so you had everything in one place. So we'll review those with LaValle Brensinger and Tony in a little bit. And then I also shared with you the questionnaire that Chief Cobb had filled out for LaValle Brensinger. The reason why I shared that with you guys is because there was a request from a community member for that document. And under the Freedom of Information Act, of course, that information is available, but really wanted to make sure you guys had it as well. So that if you were asked or any questions or, if you somehow saw it, that you guys weren't caught off guard. In my opinion, that is really a first draft. I consider that document more like a beginning of a talking point between Chief Cobb and LaValle Brensinger, where if I were a betting woman, I would bet that document has probably already changed. She filled it out, sent it over, and it's my understanding, please keep me honest here, Chief Cobb, that you guys have already gone back and forth on them saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So this is really just a conversation piece. I would ask that there be just discretion in sharing that document. This is how sort of rumors start and misinformation spreads. So always happy to share information, but want to make sure that we provide context as well. Good morning, Annie. All right, so those are the shared documents. I'm going to hand it over to Chief Cobb, see if there are any quick updates on the current the police facility right now.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The update on the facility is that our locker room toilets clogged again just this morning, and we are under strict instructions to not clear that clog so that Roto-Rooter can come and address the issue. So they have been called, they've been notified, and they're going to work to respond and come and take a look at it. So that's, at this point, a weekly occurrence, if not more so. And then we did have a friend join us in the police department, kind of a large beetle-looking thing, which we promptly secured in an evidence bag, just because. Initially, I thought it was a cockroach, but I don't think it is. I'm certainly no pest expert. It looks like a beetle as well, but it was pretty big. It was about the size of my thumb, and immediately we were, quite frankly, pretty grossed out by it. So JP Pest was notified. That happened on Monday, I believe. And JP Pest has come. They looked at everything. They're not terribly concerned about it. They said that they see these type of bugs at other times throughout their professional life, and they're going to spray anyway to address it. But they weren't terribly concerned. So that's the update of the existing facility. Oh,
all right.
Yes, that's it. Yep,
Okay, thank you. And then just wanted to ask if there have been any questions or comments that have come into the Police Facilities Advisory Committee inbox that's worth sharing. I know Kim and I had shared an email. It was just a comment of support for the Bewley land that came in that wanted to be shared with the committee. So we did get an email from a community member just in support of that land. If there's anything else that came in?
Right. I guess I want to reiterate that at least my understanding is that we are going to put questions on that site.
Yep.
So when people email in about questions of the things you're doing, we are going to start, I think, we've gotten that one and maybe one other, where they're making comments about either taxes going up or things like that. And at least my understanding is we won't be putting those on. Those can be dealt with by the selectmen at their meetings. But if there's any change to that, you should all let me know. But what you'll see on there and what should be on there now, the question and the answer without the name of the person who submitted it.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's great. And then last Wednesday was the Selectmen's meeting, which was a standing room only for you guys. It was a really good turnout. It was a great agenda. But on that agenda was a really nice retrospective dispatch, so thank you, Chief Cobb, for doing that. And then also talking about the potential locations for the test fits for this project. And so we'll hand it over to the selectmen to talk about that. I do just want to bring up Frothingham Lane because that topic keeps coming up. I've connected with Adam and Kim about it. There needs to be a little chasing on conservation. There is a conservation overlay on part of that, but there just needs to be a bit more research to figure out and go deeper into the deeds. So I think Adam's going to work on that. It's going to take a little bit of time. And I think it's worth noting that when you first pull into Frothingham Lane, that plot of land on the left is actually not town land. The town land starts further down. But we'll continue to chase that and get back to folks. Wanted to hand it over to the selectmen to see if there were anything newsworthy about the test fit locations.
I don't think there's anything really newsworthy. Ashley, you got a big agenda tonight. Some people were here. The recording of the meeting is there. Intertown has 4 pages of
Yes. I just didn't know if there was any decisions on the locations picked.
text. We discussed the site out on Newport Road. We discussed the so-called Broom property. We discussed the so-called Bonanno property. We discussed a new idea about the library parking lot, and we are ready, I think, to get our individual thoughts out and to hopefully at our meeting on the next Wednesday night to come to some recommendation for LBA.
Perfect. That's exactly what we were hoping for, just to understand if there were any decisions made. Okay, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I think that just quickly, we're going to try to save stuff for the end, but
Very quickly, I just have a request, and that is that we speak about street addresses rather than names of owners with these sites. I've only lived in this town for a while now, but I don't have any idea who the name of these people are. And I think if we could get focused on street addresses, ourselves and the others in the community would do better at keeping track of this stuff.
That's what I have in my notes, Phil. 0 Newport Road, 198 Main Street, 176 Newport Road, and library parking lot.
great. Thanks. I personally just want to say, Janet, I really appreciated your sort of creative thinking about looking at town-owned property. I know that that's been a topic that has come up with us, is there town-owned land that we might be looking at? And really appreciated the creativity and thinking through that. All right, that's all I've got for housekeeping. So Tony and our friends at La Valley Brensinger, we want to pop over to you guys to walk us through the draft proposed programmatic needs assessment document. And I do want to just make one note that there is a separate, I think, assessment that we should be expecting at some point from engineers. Does that sound right? The engineers, La Valley Brensinger's engineers were here and did a full walkthrough of our existing space, and they are working on an assessment for that as well. Assessment might not be the right word. You guys can correct me, but I believe they're working on something else as well. All right, guys, we'll hand it over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Ashley. Before we jump into the program, just back on site for a minute, I do want to mention I love the idea of using street addresses because I don't know the names at all, and probably Bob and John won't recognize any of them either. We do have from our previous work a site matrix that listed the addresses, and we were able to look at those addresses as to geography, utilities, conservation, wetland. Is that a document before next Wednesday's Board of Selectmen meeting? We want to update and address those items?
Sure, Tony, the more information we have, the better.
Right.
Can't have too much information.
Who to reach out to.
I think you reach out to Kim to get that information to us.
Okay. Well, John, I'll turn it over to you. Let's get that program.
How do you want to do this? Because, wow, there's a big echo on our side here. I'm not sure why that is, but anyway, do you want John to share a screen while we do it? I see something up on the screen in the back.
Excuse me, Bob, is that
how do you
better?
want to do this? Do we share our screen?
Bob, can you hear me?
I guess I would start at the summary of, what's the total before we go room by room, and then, let's share the total program.
Yep.
And then see what specific rooms people want to focus on.
The question I have, Tony, is how do you want to present it? Visually, how do you want to present it? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Bob, let me just ask, do our committee members, do you guys have a physical copy with you? Does everyone have one? No, okay. I do think that we should, if you can, project, that would be wonderful, if you can.
They want this.
Okay. So John, well, you could do
yes.
that. I'll go while he does that, I just want to introduce the process quickly. So we have the questionnaire that the chief submitted back, and that was shared. That we discussed that, but that doesn't necessarily change. In other words, it's not really being edited in real time. That was just the chief and her staff's input into the process, right? The other thing is the program that we sent out on 7/11, dated 7/11, was a second generation draft. That is still being reviewed by the chief and Tony. And it already shows the comments that were made prior to 7/11. I believe the day before, John. And we're going to have one more round of reviews with Tony and the chief and her staff. And then we're going to load the columns that are not loaded yet, which are existing space totals in the current building, and also a benchmark against the Harriman program, which was really based on not necessarily a renovation, but possibly a new building. I would just say really quickly that our program 20 years out is 5,000 to 6,000 square feet under Harriman's numbers. So with that, without further ado, that I'm going to turn over to John.
Is there a double mic on? There's a really bad echo.
I don't
Yeah, I
think
noticed that.
I don't think so, no. We have muted the.
Somebody has to have a double mic on.
About the microphone on the laptop that's sitting in the back.
Yeah, we turned it off. We muted.
Because the transcript is picking up whatever anyone's saying, plus then duplicating it as Adam Ricker.
How is this? Can you guys hear us? Yeah, they can't.
For you.
Your end, it's echo on our.
turn it back on, hit the drop down right next to it.
That's the reason I was pausing during my,
How's this? Nope, can't hear them now.
It's still there.
Microphone. How is this? Better?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
They can't hear us. Can you guys hear us?
Still echoing.
Can you guys hear us?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear us?
We can hear you.
yes.
Is there an echo?
It's testing 1, 2, 3.
We have no echo on
Still
our
there.
end.
All right, let's try to roll through it.
We'll roll through it. So John, can you share the summary, please? There we go.
All right, so some of you guys have the program. This first page is basically an executive summary of all the departments for the department. Each column basically represents a specific year. The first one would be existing. The next one is previous study. So we take government's information and input that into there so that we can compare it to the new program. So we have a current need, which we got from the questionnaire, chief cop. And the next two columns are 10 and 20 years. And what we're trying to do is show potential growth, future growth that's.
This is not working. Hey, John, unfortunately,
Yeah.
you are breaking up so much that we were getting like every few words.
Yeah, I'm trying to talk slowly because of the echo.
Yeah,
The
and
echo is very distracting, that's what.
yeah, and we're like his words are cutting in half for us. Do you guys want to? I wonder if leaving the teams and then coming back in for you guys might help.
I can try that.
Or do we want to drive it from our end?
I don't. No, definitely not. I don't.
Can you ask him if he can hear you?
Can you guys hear us? No.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Oh yeah, we hear you loud and clear. No, there's still an echo.
Yeah,
You can hear you, but there's still an echo, and
Yeah, I tried that.
See, and then I turn his volume down.
Yeah.
something's going on with the echo.
Well, let's try that.
Testing.
your audio is fine. It's something on our end.
Can you ask them if it's still there?
Is it still? Can you guys hear us? Is this better?
Hmm?
We
We can hear you.
You can.
Still echoing.
Is it still echoing?
There's still an echo on our end, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's really weird, it's very odd.
It's also not lost to me that this might actually be tied up in the Microsoft issues this morning, since we are on Teams, and Teams is a Microsoft product.
Yeah, we generally tend to use
He
Zoom.
has one on. Oh. Do you guys want to switch to a Zoom and see if that works better?
It would be heaven to invite everybody, so I'm not sure, Tony and John.
All right, well, if you guys want to
think I
roll
have-
with it, it's okay to talk slowly. I think we were we were getting half words from John, so. John, do you want to talk a little
Yeah.
bit and see?
Yeah, so let me know if you can't hear me.
No, you sound great now.
Okay, great. So I'll share my screen. I'm going to start over again. So what we've done is we've created a program using the questionnaire that Chief Cobb filled out with her department. So what we have is an existing column, which will basically get the original square footage from the existing facility. The next column is previous study. So Harriman will input that information so that we can compare it with our program. The next three are current needs. So this is telling us what the department needs now. And then we project out 10 and 20 years. So far, so good?
Great.
Can everybody hear me still?
Yeah, the echo's gone, actually.
Yep.
Sure can. Yep, you sound great.
It's a miracle.
Okay. So basically summarizing the total program, what we're finding is that the current need is 13,000 square feet. And then as we go through the next 10 to 20 years, we're at just shy of 17,380 square feet. And now we can kind of go into the program itself. Working with Chief Cobb, we were able to determine the amount of parking required now and for the future. So what we're seeing here is that we currently need 9 staff secure parking spots, 30 visitor parking spots. So that would provide enough parking for the community room and daily visitors. And then we also need 5 PD vehicle secure parking spots, which is a total of 44 parking spots. So this top bar right here gives us the total parking requirements. The next one here is identifying what needs to be covered and what needs to be indoors. So working with Chief Cobb, we've determined that we need 6 covered vehicle spots, and then we need 15 climate control spots, which varies from bicycles to interior impound vehicles, signboards, speed feedback signs. So 15 is basically the equivalent of bikes and smaller items. We're not talking 15 vehicles. It's just 15 items that we calculated. So what we're thinking is that there could be a bay, like a garage bay, that could provide storage for these items. The covered portions for outside, what we typically do on other towns and other cities is we provide a carport, and then that basically gives the proper cover for those vehicles.
Now, especially for
John?
deployment. I'm sorry, Tony, go ahead.
John, sorry. So everybody in the room can hear us. I muted the speaker that's labeled as Adam Ricker, and that stopped the feedback echoing issue. But now we probably can't hear you all if you speak. So when you're ready to talk, you can unmute the Adam Ricker laptop, and then we can hear you.
You want us to continue going through the program? The one thing I wanted to add, and you'll see it in a minute when we talk about the public areas, is the parking requirement for what's called visitors community room also is heavily based also on training and being able to host training. The chief can speak to that. The department can host regional training in order to be able to get several free no-cost spots at a training, whether it's regional, federal, whatever it is. There has to be a critical mass of people that can attend, other law enforcement that can attend these trainings. So it's a community / training / everything room. And in the case of a new facility, which is not in a current building, the current room that you're meeting in wouldn't be able to be used. It'd have to be located within a police department. So,
just to identify, so this is the parking, this is the covered climate control requirements. What we also do is provide some notes to clarify some of these parking requirements. Some vehicles may need power and special equipment to basically be provided near it. So what we're doing is just identifying those needs. We also provide special requirements for the PD itself. We get into CCTV requirements. radio communication antennas. These are all kind of bullet points to make sure that we're following through and coordinating with the department. Sometimes some towns and cities will, remove and relocate their existing radio tower and bring it to a new facility. That's something that we'll have to work on as we go down this road. But if there's no questions, I'm just going to continue to the next page. So what these are doing are getting into each department area. So what we've done is we've broken them up into individual parts. One is common space. So what we like to do is try to categorize those. All of these square footages that you're seeing are benchmarked from previous projects that we've worked. We've sized these accordingly. They've worked with other departments. So these are things that are basically worked on for the past 5 to 10 years.
And I wanted to also say we talked about this when we first met that Friday, but these are based on similar size municipalities, not a large city with 50,000, 100,000 population. So.
Yep. So I don't know if we want to go through line by line, but in general, the common space is basically anywhere from a vestibule, lobby space, basically public space, and then we also get into secure space like physical agility rooms in a fitness room. This would not be for the public need, but what we try to do is categorize it as a common space. But what we're doing here is we have a community room for 30 people, and then we provide bathrooms and a kitchenette, storage, to basically make that that space easy and accessible. The next portion is record storage. This is basically a department close to the lobby so that we could use this as kind of a front window, service window. This is basically all the records that the department has to keep for 3 to 7 years. And it varies from juvenile files to long-term files, short-term files to.
So John, I'm sorry to stop you, but Tony was just suggesting that we don't need to go to this level of granularity. Through every page of 12, 13 pages. Correct, Tony? So I guess if that's correct, we just want to say that this is second generation. There'll be a third generation, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, based on additional comments from the chief, Tony, and her staff. Then we're going to then populate those 2 columns that John has in yellow and be able to issue quote unquote a final draft. That this program, and this is important to say this out loud, this program lives on its own. It's not based on renovating, adding, or a new building. It's irrelevant of what site it goes on. It's the benchmark for everything we're going to do going forward in the study, right? And as such, it's going to dictate to us very clearly a general idea of the acreage required, working with our engineers, VHB, right, John, as to what acreage we might need to accommodate the parking, a building. And then, of course, we charge you 2 different options, a 1-story and a 2-story. So obviously the 2-story footprint is going to be a little bit smaller. So that's going to vary in a requirement for the site as well. Right, John?
Yep.
So for the folks in the room, I just
If
asked
we don't
Chief
need to go
Cobb
through,
to type in a
if we
comment on
wanna
how the
compare,
engineering
square
assessment
footages from
is going to
previous
play into
studies,
that.
our program is at 17.3. The previous one was at right around 23,000. So we've improved the overall square footage of the proposed building. We right-sized them accordingly from previous projects on the same size.
There was a request in the chat to talk about the conditions assessment. Yes, so everybody went out about 2 weeks ago, I believe. The entire team led by Dale Doler, one of our senior architects. They're working on the report. I think I saw per your schedule, Tony, that you have an August 6th date. We should be able to have a draft to you by then, and I've already communicated with Dale and his team, because he's managing that team, that we want to have a draft to you by August 6th. as far as this program, I know that Tony had this. I'm reading. Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm reading the chats as they pop up. Thank you very much. Um, as far as the program, realistically, by the time we get any last input, hopefully early next week from the chief or staff and Tony, and to populate the missing columns, right, John? We're probably, not probably, we will aim for having that program updated and to everybody, to Tony, and then distributed as he sees fit by Thursday or Friday next week. So no later than a week from today. John and I talked about it, right, John?
We did. Yeah, that should be no problem. Do you guys have any
And
questions for the program?
Bob, John, just for clarity, I think when we see that pop-up text, it's from Chief Cobb at Adam Ricker's laptop.
Got it. Yes, it's actually hello. Okay.
Yes. Watching her type and the thing pop up from Adam is not coincidental.
That's all we really have. I mean, we're making really good progress. I think that John and I are happy with where we're at right now. I've been talking with Dale, as I said, and we're excited to test fit this thing and understand how it's gonna work. Right, John?
Absolutely.
So I guess to that, sorry, Ashley, I see you're about to speak, but just to talk a little bit about the test fit and the two-story, because there has been some question about that. When we write these RFPs and we bring designers on at these early stages, we often get asked, if the site is smaller and requires us to have a two-story building rather than a large sprawling building with all the parking and the associated patrol parking, covered parking, what does that mass look like? So we find it helpful to build that into the early stage, and what designers will often refer to as a massing model. How big does this mass look like at one story? How sprawling is it? Do we need 5 acres? If we have a site that's only 1.5 acres or 2 acres, and we have to go to two-story, what does that look like? And then the second part of that often comes down to cost. If we build half the foundation and half the roof and sandwich the second floor in between, what efficiencies do we gain, and how much do the stairs and an elevator really impact the overall project budget? So that's why we set it up that way. I wouldn't say we certainly have clients that say, geez, we've got enough sites, we don't need to do a two-story model. Give me 2 one-story models on these 2 sites. We have others that say, yeah, the two-story is definitely the way to go. We like the separation operationally from the police department. We like that separation, and that works for us. So what we tried to do in bringing this designer, Bob and John, on board is give the community, the advisory committee, the flexibility to look at those 2 scenarios. And I think there's been some conversation on that. So I hope that answers kind of why we are where we are at.
So Tony, that you brought up a great point that actually John and I kind of went through this really quickly. Didn't mention that we are going to have 2 versions of this program. One, which is the 1-story, which is what this is, right, John? And then one that's a 2-story because it adds, I calculated 1,400 square feet more for stairs, elevator, shafts, and all that. So we're actually going to provide the town with 2 different versions. One, which is this one with any changes, of course, and then one that's going to be bigger in footage because of the stairs and elevator shaft and all that good stuff. So you'll have both. The only thing I was going to say is that there's a couple of things to look for in a site, right? Being public safety design nerds, as I joke, we like to have a site that has a minimum of 2, but ideally 3 means of egress and ingress into the site for a police facility. That has to do with operational security, separation of public from police, CALIA standards, and other things of that nature. And the other thing is, and John will testify to this, and so will Tony, as seasoned public safety guys, is that in a police program, about 60% of it wants to be on the first floor, you know? And so a lot of times when we try to do a footprint building, which means that both floors are the same exact footprint, there's a lot of push and pull, right, John, to try to make that work, because 60 to 65% of the program wants to be on the ground level. So, thank you.
So are there any questions from our committee members? I'm going to hand it over to Bruce Parsons.
In the study that you're working on, you have not mentioned anything about a plan or a study for the Bucher building, replacing or refurbishing it.
Is there any way that you guys can unmute?
Try it again.
There
Can you
go.
hear me? Is that still echoing? Is there any way, are you working on a plan to also include the Bucher building, or whether it's renovating or replacing it? Or do you assume that the plan you come up with, a 1 or 2 story, will fit in that space?
I'll defer to Tony.
They're not talking about it.
So at this point, we're just talking program? and-
Yep. I think I can actually help answer this as well. I think this is the general needs assessment, so this is really the grounding, and then I think the next phase, once they fill in the existing and the previous study and they get the engineering data back, they will use this to do the 2 test fits of both the Bucher building in some way, shape, or form, and another location as well. But this is really like ground zero of what needs to happen. So I think this will feed into those 2 test fits. Correct me if I'm wrong, though, gentlemen.
No, you are correct. What this will do is
correct.
give us that total square footage. Let's say it's 17,000 square feet, and the current police station offers us 3,000 square feet. Where do we make up the difference?
And can I just ask
I think that also, oops, sorry.
No, go ahead, Bob.
Can I just say one thing yeah, thank you. So the reality is that the site where you are now is incredibly tight. There's not really room for the parking that's required for the operations. There are security issues with separation of public and police. The current Sally Port situation, Chief Cobb will tell you, is not secure and not safe. You're sharing a driveway with a residential facility next door, a single-family home, and the actual site itself is very, very tight. So, we don't want to be negative. We'll surely can explore that, but it's going to be very difficult to make that work on the current site.
Sure. And can I just, I think we've talked about this a few times, but want to just reiterate or hear from you guys. Once we do get the sort of final version of this programmatic needs assessment, what is the role of this committee? What will we be talking about and looking over and discussing once we get this final version? Will we be talking about the square footage and whether that could
The
adjust?
select board.
Okay. They're deflecting to the selectmen on what? I think we just want to understand when we get this final needs assessment, like, will we be talking about the square footage? Will we be, what will, I know that we're certainly not going to be saying, hey, let's look at paint colors and rug samples, but once we get this programmatic, like the final version of this, what will we be doing? Or, what are you expecting from us with this?
It seems to me that might be a little bit of a back and forth between myself, the architects, and perhaps the committee to explain a space or to help the committee understand why a space might be needed and necessary. So I certainly don't want to put words in the board's mouth, but it seems like that's something that we'll flesh out a little bit here, and then the the committee might then forward that on to the selectmen and say, well, this is an area we couldn't come to terms on. The chief thinks she needs another 200 square feet for this, but the committee doesn't really believe that's a need for the police department. But
I think at this point, we're
That's
all
correct,
all
Chief.
ears. The reason we've got you gathered together is so that we can get a fresh perspective on things. So I'm making notes here of what your questions are.
Tony commented, what did you say?
Yeah, so often the building committees, advisory committees are representative citizens to question why the chief needs particular room, why the architect says that room needs to be 200 square feet. So you're the belts and suspenders of what we do on a regular basis. And what seems normal and consistent to us may not be something that this advisory committee agrees with or understands.
Yep.
Right? And then you're the ones who are out in the community on a regular basis. To those that may not have attended this meeting or watched the video, to be able to explain how the building get to 15,000 square feet,
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
Now,
Tony.
you
this one-
advise, hold on, Bob. As
Sorry about that.
advisory to the select board, my guess, in my experience, says this committee is going to vote that the selectmen take the recommendation of X amount of square foot. Don't look at other sites. We want to stay where we are. And that's your advice to the select board as a
Yep.
committee.
Is it safe to assume that when we get this final version, that we will spend time in one of these meetings, potentially really diving in item by item and having discussions on these?
Yes, and
Okay.
and you've had it, even in Rev 2, Rev 1, if there's spaces that you all want to question today, that helps inform us as to what Rev 3 will look like.
Great. That
Can
is,
I want to say one thing that I said a few minutes ago, and that is we take our charge very seriously. We're not, I want to assure this committee, the selectmen, and also your community that we are not looking to inflate this program, that we're not trying to make it larger than it needs to be. There's a couple of things that need to be taken into account as people look at this. One, it's based on input from your police staff. Two, it's based on benchmark, other communities, but sound operational public safety police planning in similar communities to meet CALIA, IACP, and the New Hampshire standards. And it's looking 20 plus years out to account for future growth, modest growth, that as you noticed in a summary that John went over, the growth from 10 to 20 years out was pretty much the same. There was no additional growth. It was more 10 years out. And the current one is the current needs for what should be an operational, functional police department, rather than what's there now. So we just want to assure you that we're taking this seriously, that we're not just padding numbers.
thank you. On that note, are there any other questions or comments? Oh, we do. Bill Helm?
So just for example, for the committee, dealing with the so-called community room that's outlined here, we might ask LBA whether or not this room that we're sitting in would satisfy the requirement for a community room within the various regulations that were just discussed, including the minimum of 30 people. So that might be the sort of question that if I were sitting where you are,
That's exactly
I'd want
what,
to ask. Okay?
absolutely. And I think that those are the items that I think I just wanted clarity on. Is that in scope for us to be discussing? And if so, at what point, so that folks here in the room understand sort of what our role is moving forward when this gets completed. So I think that's great. Did I see another hand? Phil, yes.
I have a long list of questions, but I'll only get to two of them here. You indicated that the previous study your target is playing off against is the Harriman study, which was done in 2018. There's a later study that was done in 2020 with a program statement developed by the New London Police Department. So I guess at some point I'd like to know why we're jumping back to Harriman, which was done under a previous chief, or at least why we're not presenting both previous study square footages in the tabulation. And my second question has to do with future growth. Again, against the Myers report, the current need is an increase of 39%. The future need is an increase of 86% in square footage over and against the New London Police Department's program statement of a few years ago. What is the basis for the future growth projections, and why are we not addressing the Myers report program statement?
I think the Myers report, John, I'd like you to address that, because we looked at that, and we have specific thoughts about that particular one, and so did Tony, I believe.
Is there any way that we can mute off and on? All right, perfect, thank you. So to answer your questions, we looked at both previous reports. The Harriman is more in line with the program that we're doing now. If we look at the Dennis Myers, the total square footage was, I think, 9,600 square feet, which is not apples and it's apples and oranges. It doesn't align with the report that we're currently doing right now. The Harriman is more accurate to what we're doing currently. The other reason why we're looking at these is, again, 2018 was 6 years ago, so things have changed. And we also have a new chief here as well. So there's new needs for the department.
I would also say that the Harriman, the Myers thing, frankly, in our opinion, was missing a lot of components. And Tony, I know you have some thoughts about that. You're nodding your head. Yeah, we're not casting aspersions on other people's work, but we are professionals at doing this work, and we just have our own thoughts about it, right or wrong, and we felt that it was reasonably incomplete. It also was very limited by the charge of staying where it is, which then put sort of this overarching blanket on it rather than looking at the true needs of the department. That's our take from looking at it. Tony, what do you think about what we just said?
Yes, I agree, and I've had this conversation early on with the select board, with the chief, with others, that, when you put the two reports side by side, which is the stronger report, had the most information. It wasn't really slanted to staying in the current building, in the current location, right? So I think people have heard me refer to blue sky thinking, right, or white page thinking. The Harriman reports seem to be more in line with a needs study. What do we need? As the Myers report maybe said, what can we fit in the current building, in the current location, with some modifications? So they were answering two very different questions, and answering them as best they could with the limitation of information. This process that we've taken on is that blue sky white paper. Let's wipe the slate clean. What do we absolutely need with the current chief to get through the next 10 years, the next 30 years? Where are we 20 years out? And so that growth, whether it's 18% or 39%, is now coming from your operational command as to what that growth is. Back to Ashley's earlier question of when does the committee get into this? This is that conversation where you all may look at those growth numbers and say, you're not getting 3 more staff. You're not getting 1 more dispatcher. It's not going to happen in 10 years. You all have to collectively come to a consensus and advise us, what should that growth be? Is it 10%? Is it 30%? We're here to respond as to what that means architecturally and programmatically, but we cannot guess. It's not in our professional expertise to say you're going to experience 30% growth. Does that help, Phil?
I think I'm hearing you say that the
Yes, I'll
Harriman
mute it.
report better matches up with the current desires. 21 office and workstation spaces, 8 meeting spaces, 9 restrooms for a 9-person department.
Are you referring to the Harriman study, sir?
No, that comes out of your tables.
If you want, we can go through each one of these. I would strongly suggest that a conversation be held with Chief Cobb
Yeah.
about the requirements, because it's something that came directly from conversations with the department. But we can go through every line item if you wish, rather than lumping them together.
Here's what I would propose. I think we wait, it sounds like we'll get the updated version, did you say in a week or so, with the existing and the previous study columns filled in? What I would propose is that if we are going to get that next week, that
I think they
we,
need to be unmuted.
They're still muted, yeah.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Here is what I would propose. I think you guys said that we should get the updated version potentially at the end of next week with the existing and the previous study columns filled in. If that does come out next week, what I would suggest is that we get that in the hands of the committee pretty quickly and everybody spend a week really diving into it and coming up with some questions so that at our next meeting, we can spend that full hour really diving in, maybe line item by line item. If it needs to be a longer meeting, maybe we can talk about that if we think that would be beneficial so that we can really dig in and ask questions. Would that make sense? Yep. And it would be really, if we do that, are we still in July or are we in August? July? If there's an opportunity for you guys to be here in person for that conversation, I think it would be really beneficial. And we can go from there. How do folks feel about that?
I think you're looking
Good.
at August.
August, okay.
Yeah, it'll be August 2nd.
It'll be August, yeah.
Okay. Does that sound like a good plan to folks here? Okay.
Ashley, can you be specific? I think the last time we met, we talked about August 2nd being the next meeting. I heard the consultants talk about later in the month because they had an August 6th date. I thought you were going to meet on the 2nd.
That's what we just said.
16th and the 30th, if I'm correct. Okay.
Yep, and that's what we just said, the second. I just couldn't remember if we had another Friday in this month or
So-
not, or if second is.
So I think what you're saying is get the information in the next week and talk about it on the 2nd.
You're exactly right. So we'll spend a week reviewing it.
So I'm just trying to help our consultants in terms of when you might like them to be here.
Yep,
Okay, thank you.
yep. So August 2nd, folks, if you can be here in person.
Right. That
and if
would
there's
fall in line with our first, sorry, that would fall in line with our first and third Thursday.
Yep, exactly. Again,
Friday.
I just couldn't remember if there was another Friday in this month or not, so I think we're good. August 2nd, is there any chance that folks can be here for 90 minutes instead of 60? Absolutely. Okay. So August 2nd, we'll plan for 90 minutes, and Tony and Bob and John, if there's an opportunity for you guys to join us in person, that would be fantastic. And we'll go from the, perfect. Is there anything, Tony, on the updated schedule? I know that you said it was updated or revised. Is there anything newsworthy there that we need to be aware of?
No, nothing newsworthy there. We're on track. Bob's team, John, are on track to get us to our end date, so that's good news. And it's
Okay.
really, getting through this next 2 weeks, getting folks to dig into the details of the program are really critical to moving forward.
Perfect.
Architecturally, single floor, 2-story massing models. These guys are very quick at doing that. It's the enjoyable part of architecture rather than the numbers side. So I think once we hone in on program and get folks to understand what the nuances of all the rooms are, we should move pretty quickly.
And Tony, I would just add, there was a comment that was made regarding the meeting room that they're in right now, right? And I think that that's a perfect example. I want to throw that in before we depart. That's an operational decision that the town has to make with the chief and her staff. You know, if this building moves, you know, I'm just role playing, okay, half a mile away, you know, is it operationally reasonable and efficient for the PD to use this space which is a beautiful space, by the way. John and I really enjoyed it, right, John? It's a beautiful space. It's a beautiful old building. To use it and have to drive there and do all that, or should the department itself have that capacity within a new facility on a new site? That, honestly, is really a decision that you folks have to make. You know, depending on budgeting and everything else. And we as the architects, right, John, we don't have an axe to grind. We know that we would recommend that it should be with a police department, but if it has to be remote, meaning where it is now, so be it. That's a decision by the town and the police department. Right, Tony?
Yep.
Great. Any other questions? Phil, go ahead.
Just to rewind, so the committee is going to see the updated program statement by July 26th. Is that correct?
Next Friday?
Correct.
Correct, yes.
Great. Okay, anything else? Great, we do have a few minutes here. We've got probably 4 minutes if there are any questions or comments from our community members who are here. Now's your chance. Yes. Good morning.
Colin Beasley. Thank you. So just for clarification, and we can talk about it at the next meeting, but the Harriman report goes out to 2037. There was a reference at the top of the meeting that suggested that this data compared to the Harriman report 20 years from now is 5,000 to 6,000 square feet less. The Harriman report out to 2037 has its total square foot of 14,622, which is less than the square footage in your report. So if you could reconcile those numbers next time we get together, I'd appreciate that. The Myers report issue, I really believe that there should be a column in there for that. It is clearly a program that was reviewed with the police department in detail, was agreed to, was actually used as a reference to the Stallman building, which was an alternative site pursued by the police department during that process. And it would be worthy of the community to see all that data together. So I would request that the committee consider adding that column in there. Excuse me.
I can speak to that. I think I personally have some thoughts on that because I'm not sure that report is fully, I'm not sure there's integrity with that report because it's my understanding that it was edited but after Dennis sent it over.
The process that was used by the committee with Dennis Myers is that we went back and forth and the committee helped participate in the writing of the report. That is a fact, yeah.
Yep.
But it was Myers signed off on it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what editing you're talking about.
I'm not sure. I think I agree with Tony and LaValle Brenzinger that I'm not sure that it's the same sort of assessment than the Harriman assessment. I think if folks feel like they want to see that data as well, it's just definitely apples to oranges, I think.
I would just remind everybody that that program statement was used by Chief Cobb and Frank Anzalone to design a clean white sheet of paper addition to the Stallman building and came out at precisely the same spot. So Stallman has a lot of space. That addition could have been any size because it needed more space than what's there now. Could have been any size that the chief and others wanted, and it came out precisely to the same square footage, literally within 100 square feet of what's available at Bucher. So the edits that were done to that report, I was the chair of that committee, had to do with the presentation, not with the material, and there were no changes that I'm aware of to the program statement.
Actually, all I'm asking for is really the program numbers be placed
Okay,
on that spreadsheet.
sure.
And then have that, and then the dialogue to your point can play out.
Okay,
I think what's critical is that at some point in time, what's going to play out is what's the dollars that we're spending for $14,000? What would be the dollars that we spend for 14,000 square feet? What's the dollars we're spending for 9,600 square feet? And what are we buying for the difference?
sure. Do the committee members feel like that data is vital and would like to see the comparison? Do you guys like that added in? Yep, okay, great. So folks, on the Teams call, Tony, LaValle Brensinger, if you guys could add that column in, that would be wonderful.
And I have one last request for the architects. If you could provide at some point a list of the communities that you use as a reference point for the square footage you're designing for New London, I think that'd be helpful information for benchmarking. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Colin. Did you guys hear that? Okay, great. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Bowers.
My name's Bob Bowers. I'm a resident of New London. I just want some clarification. If I understood the charge the selectmen gave you, one of the solutions to be looked at was what could be done with the existing building. Whether Myers gets involved and looked at or not may or may not have some value, but I thought that the committee was going to be looking at what could be done. Obviously, it would not give all the square footage that this report does, all the things the chief has asked for, but is that now off the table? You're not even going to look at it?
No, I think we are. I think once we get the final programmatic needs assessment with the columns added in, we'll add in the Myers study. We then use that. That's really ground zero at looking at, I think what you're referring to is the test fits. And what we've contracted with LaValle Brensinger is to do a test fit of our existing site and then a test fit of a site somewhere else. So there will still be two sort of options that we're looking at. One of using this existing site and then one of another one.
And I apologize, I'm not familiar with the language, so I'm not quite sure what test fit means, but in my mind, I'm picturing the architect looking at the building, saying, here's what you can do, not that you need 500 square feet for the chief's office, but if we did it this way, 480 would work, but what can you do at that site? Is that fair to say? Is that what they're going to do?
Yeah, and I think what we had talked about in the last meeting, there are really four, I think, options that we're looking at here.
I thought so.
Yep, one is we remodel the existing space. We could
Yes.
tear down the existing space and rebuild in the
Yes.
same footprint.
Okay.
There is buying land and building fresh, and then there's buying another building and retrofitting it. So I think we're still, correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but we're still looking at those four options.
I just want to be sure we're looking at the building. The other part of that was the charge to you on the new building was to include the McEnroe land as a possibility to make it work. It would seem logical that that would be looked at as well with remodeling the Bucher building to see how that would fit. So I would ask you to do that. Thank you.
I think that is for the selectmen, so we'll leave it with that. Okay? Anything else? All right, folks, well, happy Friday. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Tony and Bob and John. Have a great weekend. We'll see you in person in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a great weekend.